you take someone with the spiritual connection that DMX has, the relentless energy, how big those tracks were. I mean, he had 2 #1 albums in 1 year. He could pick 20 songs from those 2 albums only and be okay, right? You've got his first 5 albums all went #1. Outside of Year of the Dog, I'm pretty sure there's 4 songs that were huge in those years. So in a fractured 20-song environment with a spiritual dude talking to Jesus, you know, and he had big hits, I'm not sure that is a safe place for Jay-Z to hang.
I think hip-hop will always be a voice for the people.
Yo. Hey, Hunt, with the fancy red background, what's going on, man?
Mozzie right now. I'm gonna turn Mozzie out.
Yeah, you got Mozzie behind you, too.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Doing for one mob.
Yeah. Yo, are you up on Guap Daddy 4000?
Oh,
the I'm talking about him quite a bit.
Yeah.
I've been checking for him, but how do
you
you like him?
You know, it's weird. It's like, it reminds me of Blueface. You know how, like, you know, just 1 week, like 2 years ago, whatever it was, like everybody just started talking about Blueface at the same time.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Guap. And I checked him out. I like him. I
mean, he's been doing it a minute though. He was on you know, Buddy's Harlan and Alondra album. I mean, he's been making noise for a couple years now, but definitely he's used quarantine to raise his stock up a lot.
Yeah, he's done a good job of that.
And did he do a deal with Dreamville?
That's news to me. I do know he was at you know, the ROTD3 sessions, but he's with somebody else. I actually did his press bio a little over a year ago, and he's with, I want to say he's with the same management group as like Anderson .Paak, but I could be wrong. He's well staked. Let's put it like that.
Got you. You're holding back. You've been holding back. You be doing that. You slick. Jay be slick, Justin.
Nah, man.
I mean,
I'm just trying to get on your guys' level. That's all.
No downgrade.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody. I am Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads. And with me, I have Jake Payne, our editor-in-chief. And this week, we got family in the building. The company man, Justin Hunt, joins us. What's going on, guys?
Word up, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Man. It's been a minute. I haven't seen you since you know, pre-quarantine days. It's been a while, dog. How you been holding up, Justin?
Quarantine's been good for me. You know,
yeah.
I started calling it refresh. I stopped calling it quarantine, and I think I've seen a lot of, you know, people start becoming more self-reflective. I think I've seen a lot of people put new processes in place so they can become more efficient. I've seen people deal with family stuff and addiction stuff. And, you know, I honestly think that when life gets back to normal, or the new normal, you know, more people will be more prepared than we expect. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, how does that apply to you? I mean, what have you changed?
Well, I mean, for me, it's great because since leaving Empire and then becoming more consistent on content again, I've had no distractions. Like, there aren't events to go to. There aren't listening sessions to go check out. And one thing that can be challenging for me on the creative side is, you know, having to go do a bunch of business stuff or relationship stuff or lunches or dinners, and then finding myself in a position where I can just flow creatively is consistently a challenge. And that hasn't been the case at all. So it's been great for me. My AC broke in my place, but
yeah.
You know, like, part of me is like, let's give him to fix it, but then the other part of me is like, I don't want to die. So it's like, yeah. I'm not sure
balance, right? Like, yeah. Which way do I go?
Talk about later.
Yeah.
But so it's been great. My channel's more active now. I've got 20 pieces of content just scheduled for the next month, which allows me the opportunity just to focus on longer form pieces, both editorial. I've started writing reviews again. I've got another feature next week. Submitting for Revolt, so that's good. And then, so I have a bunch of interviews I've been conducting over Zoom and Skype for the past couple of weeks. I've got a bunch of evergreen conversations with the All Out show that are up there. I started a new show called Debate Down. First episode was with Murs. I think it's going to be different people each week. So that's, you know, 10 topics over 5 videos. And that puts me in place to start doing more drips or new music based stuff. One original news piece a week, and then breakdowns every Saturday.
Man,
So it's like getting the knowledge flow happening again is most important.
Where are your reviews? Where do they live?
Well, this one's on Revolt, so I just did a review for Mozzie's Beyond Bulletproof, so that's on there right now.
There you go.
That's a video or editorial?
Editorial. I might make it a video. I mean, it's more of a think piece than is a review on the album.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Words.
So you talk about a refresh, man. There's a New York Times article this week acknowledging that hip hop has led the way in the entertainment refresh. How things are going. D Nice with Club Quarantine and Swiss Beats and Tim with Verzuz. And to me, Verzuz has been one of the best things to happen in years for me, just for the culture. Of course, we started with Tim and Swizz. Now I missed that one. I missed Manny and Scott. I caught both those recaps, but I started really locking in with Primo and RZA, and then Teddy Riley and Babyface. But last night, Saturday night, with Jill Scott and Erykah Badu, it was a whole different level. It was joyous. I said to somebody, I felt like it was 3 hours, and I felt like I did after like Game 7 of the finals that went into overtime. It was that level of fulfillment, where every single minute I was engaged, locked in, and just like joyous. But what did you guys catch it first of all, and what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I caught it in real time, and I was really impressed. This one definitely. I don't know if either of you would agree. Justin, did you watch it live?
No, I've watched the YouTube playback. So
Okay,
halfway through, we'll say.
Yeah.
This one, I mean, it didn't have the air of competition. It had the air of like mutual respect. Not to say that others of these have been super like chippy or anything like that, but this one was really just kind of like a celebration of music in a really cool way.
Yeah, I think that the versus aspect of these battles becomes less in competition and more celebration, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is part of the power of them. There's no anger and animosity necessarily there, but there's so much education, and there's so many people tuning in who forgot songs, who didn't know, who produced certain things. I mean, when I think about the Neo Austin, battle. I'm sitting there like, dang, I forgot that Jonta Austin, is it Jonta or Jonte? I always mess it up. I always
asking the wrong guy, yeah.
I always forget how many stuff he made.
Yeah.
The thing I thought set it off really great last night for Jill Scott and Erykah Badu is they played the same song first. Both of them played the same song at the beginning.
Got it out the way.
And Jill Scott's story about it was so complimentary of Erykah Badu. She's like, this is the first time I'd ever wrote a song for anybody. This is the first time you'd ever let anybody write a song for you. And you were in traffic one day for a show, and it was the first time I got on stage, And so those type of glimpses, I think, are what make this whole series so powerful.
Yeah, I love the stories, we've all heard the music, right? But the stories are what take it over the top. And they took their time with it. They breathed, man. It was also interesting to me that with Jill, and so Erykah, I probably listen to every week. I don't think there's been a week that's gone by since she dropped where I didn't hear some Badu music. So her catalog, I'm intimately familiar with, like track listings, the whole nine. I love Jill too. I mean, she's one of my favorite artists. I've seen her in concert multiple times, but I don't study her albums like that. And so she was hitting me with joints that like just reminded me of how strong her catalog is. She doesn't have the same kind of like, well, actually she's got radio hits too, but just not that kind of catalog that you go back to. And so Rolling Hills, when that came on last night, just blew my mind. And I listened to it probably 6 or 7 times since. And I woke up this morning thinking, wait a minute, the change is the chords to Everybody Loves the Sunshine. It's a real like, simplistic breakdown of it. I was like, okay, that's why it's cracking my cranium so hard. But just being able to kind of re-experience her catalog was a joy for me last night too.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I graduated high school in 2002. at a time when both of these women, Jill especially, like I remember going to prom and like hearing, music in the car. Like it's a walk back to a really sentimental time in my life. And that was great last night as well.
I'm not finished with the live again. It looks like Jill Scott didn't play Daydreaming. Did that not happen?
She didn't play Daydreaming. She didn't play Golden. But I got a theory on that. So it was supposed to go 20 rounds, as you guys know. It only went 17, I believe, 17 and a half, because Erykah had some technical difficulties and Jill played a couple. But she ended with Cross My Mind. And there's a tie to it, which I want to get to in a second. There were 3 nods to something monumental that happened this weekend that I want to get into too. So one was Erykah told a story about, the beginning of On and On. Now everybody, most hip hop heads know that dun, 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 is like the reference to Audio 2 and Top Billin' and stuff like that. But last night she shared the story about how it was also a knock at the door, and she wanted to like knock and let Mary J. Blige know, with that real love beat, that she was on the scene, that she was coming, right? Which I thought was dope. I'd never heard that story before. That was crazy. She also wore some special glasses last night, and then Jill Scott played a song, her last song, For a Reason last night. So Erykah's glasses were a tribute to Andre Harrell. And apparently Swiss Beats had told Jill Scott that Andre Harrell had been looking forward to hearing the song Cross My Mind. So that's how Jill finished it. So they both paid multiple tributes to someone that we lost this weekend, Andre Harrell. So people know about Puff Daddy, people know about Russell Simmons. Andre is a one who did not get the same level of praise and shine as those guys, but had as much impact as anyone in Black music over the last 40 years that I can recall. What did he mean to you guys? And what are some things about his legacy that like will live on for you?
I mean, go ahead, Justin.
I look at the success that the people he was affiliated with also achieved, after, their careers went in different directions. Diddy's become a powerhouse under Andre Harrell's tutelage, Mary J. Blige, the way people who spent a lot of time with him describe him, the interviews and the, opportunities I've been around him, he was always smiling. And, for someone to be that successful, but also that relentless, and have that many proteges who are able to be successful even after their business arrangements, and to me, it's the most powerful statement. And, I'm not sure what success looks like if you're not making other people better, if you're not lifting other people to places where even maybe they didn't see themselves getting. And he has a lot of icons that came from his, wing of the entertainment tree. And I think that speaks to his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I really admire Andre for being a behind the scenes figure. I mean, obviously he was recognizable to anyone paying attention, but he was more, in my opinion, behind the scenes than like a Russell Simmons in the 80s. And I love the fact that he came out of making music, with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and ascended into this truly a mogul. That to me is cool, and took that and went to film, went to television, went to all of these different places, and kept a low profile like that. Those are some of my favorite execs in hip hop. I love the the Jay-Z's and the Dames and Puffies and all of that. But like you said, Justin, I mean, Andre empowered those around him, where people associated Uptown as much with Teddy Riley or Heavy D as they did him, in my opinion. And I just think that's a really, really cool feat, and he wasn't above then, going to Bad Boy and help making that strong. And later on, all these other little ventures, Motown and Revolt and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I bought Champagne of Rap, the cassette, when it came out, back in the day.
Wow.
And, I had never heard any of the songs or anything like that, but I saw like something in the rap section with two dudes in suits, and ties, and one dude was wearing glasses, and I'm like, yeah, what is this? So I checked it out, and the album didn't blow me away. I got to be honest. Like, there's a couple songs that were cool and everything, but it wasn't my bag. But when I started hearing Uptown was probably okay. So there were two labels back in the '80s where no matter what came out, I was going to check it out. The first was Taboo, Clarence Avant. You got Alexander O'Neal, Sherelle, SOS Band. Like anything that dropped on Taboo, I was going to check out. But then Uptown dropped, and it was the same thing, but it was this like fusion of everything I loved: R&B, rap music, but it was upscale, it was aspirational. So you had Heavy, and then Guy, and Jodeci, and Mary, and all these people, and Heavy spawned Pete Rock, and then Puff came, and just his legacy is, most people don't know him unless they're insider executives, but they know every single person that he touched. Halle Berry, Halle Berry's career launched because of him. She did Jungle Fever, but her star turn was Strictly Business, And so for me, as a young man, wanting to be in the entertainment business, he was the guy that I looked to. Like, I wanted to be that guy because he took it a level. I believe he took it to film and television even before Russell did with Uptown Entertainment. And, he kind of showed us as aspiring Black executives that there was a path toward all of it, not just rap music, but all things in Hollywood. So, he will definitely be missed, but, rest in peace, Andre Harrell.
Yeah, it seemed like, too, getting back to the battle, that text for Jill to end the set that way, I feel like that text came in during the battle from Swizz. So he kind of mentioned that song. Like, she seemed visibly affected enough to play that joint to close. And that was just a beautiful way of, ending it.
Yeah. So we talked about the refresh earlier, and what this really is. So do you guys think that like artists are in the lab now, just like making some of the best music that we're going to hear from them?
I hope so. I don't know if I can qualify whether it's going to be better or worse. I think a number of artists pull inspiration from life experiences, and I'm not sure how much life they're experiencing, even though I think they might be more introspective. I'm curious about what types of sounds come out. I think we might hear more range and styles and sounds because, like DaBaby, for example, I'm a big fan of the Baby, right? He just released another project, and Blame It on Baby, and it sounds just like his project before in a lot of ways, and like the project before that, Kirk and I can't think of the other one right now. And so I wonder if he had made that album when everything was locked down, if he was working on this project when it was locked down, would it still sound like it's for the club? Is it still going to be a bouncy album? Is it still all about bops? Is it still targeting mass groups, right? And I personally think no. I don't think that most people are in that space now since everyone has stay-at-home orders. So I'm more interested in the sounds and the introspection, but I don't know if it'll necessarily be better or worse because I don't think about a lot of these artists as making things for themselves as much as they're making things for opportunity or playlisting or, festival bookings. Generally speaking, there's a balance that a lot of the successful artists are able to hit where they're, at least most revered artists are able to hit where they're themselves, but also able to connect with most people. And that's few and far between. So I don't know if the music will be better or worse because I'm not sure if these types of, if everyone has the same, reps, everyone has the same target, everyone has the same, goals. But I think the sounds, I'm curious about what the sounds sound like when we're not all in the same place, hearing something that hits and then inevitably go back home with like, I gotta get something on that wave, which I think happens a lot. I don't think, so my question is like, what's everyone, like what's the disparity gonna be like? Like what is the range of new sounds, which I think it's in itself could lead to a renaissance in production. But I'm more curious about that than whether or not the artists are working. They all have studios at their home. I'm not sure if their reps or their situations change that much. And I wonder what they're going to talk about, because if you have 2 months away from being around people and hearing what people have to say, what direction does that take you?
Yeah, I think it is an opportunity for more originality, because people aren't in the same place and reacting to the same thing at the same time. I do think that dance music will continue to be a big part of it, but the venue for dance is shifting from the club to TikTok. I think most dance music will be designed to get people in their homes doing routines and stuff like that. Drake kind of led the way with that with Tootsie Slide. I also think that people will be a bit more locked in, a bit more focused for the same reasons that you mentioned up top. So I could see it's not going to be an advantage for people like Kendrick and, those who just hole up and just live and breathe in the studio. But I think for other artists who are more distracted and, on social media and hanging out and stuff like that, they will just be just kind of digging in. So I'm curious to see how it pops up for them. But Jake, what about you?
I'm really pleased that, when this first happened, I thought that we would just see everybody just putting stuff out. It was I feel like, in the last decade, sometimes during the holidays when people tended to be home and, kind of bored with their families, artists would drop a lot of, surprise projects and albums and songs and freestyles and things like that, and really just kind of jam up the canon. And that hasn't been the case. We've seen, obviously, Jay Electronica released his album the week, I think, before, kind of the shutdown, but we've seen West Side Gun, which was an album that he had made in early March, if I'm not mistaken, or February or January, sometime earlier this year before it. People haven't been flooding the market. And I do think there's a push of quality as much, if not more, of quantity. And that's one of the things that Ambrosia for Heads always stood for. But I'm so glad that people with these home studios aren't just these are the quarantine sessions, boom, boom, boom. There's been careful. And I wonder too, I wonder if it's folks watching D-Nice and watching Questlove and Just Blaze and so on and so forth, and realizing what it takes to make a record that people will be playing 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's deep. That's deep. Every time I see Theo, man, I get concerned. He always sneaks up. I'm like, yo, there's something about it. Get him.
He might take me out of the game if I disappear. Blair Witch Project 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of at-home projects, there was a gigantic project dropped by surprise by a dude who just got home this week. Tekashi 6ix9ine. This one, I got to get your take on this one, especially Justin, because I know you've talked a lot about him over the years. The guy is, first of all, I think he is the first person to overtake Donald Trump in terms of being able just to command attention. His ability to wield that and troll is unparalleled right now. But looking at him, he owned the narrative. Yeah, I'm a rat. Of course I'm a rat. But let me tell you why I rat it. And wouldn't you rat? He came out and justified it. He owned it. It was spectacular to watch him. And so Swizz and Premier topped out at around 200,000 simultaneous viewers on Instagram. Teddy and Face were about 415K. Last night, Jill and Erykah topped at around 749, 750,000. This dude did 2 million real-time users in 10 minutes. It's crazy. But Justin, I see you looking at you're getting ready. What's going on? What's up with this one?
I think he's the perfect storm of everything that always goes viral. Gang beef, incendiary commentary, crazy colors, shareable music, and prison and women, and you name it. He is 5'4" of all that. You know what I mean? And
is that how tall he is?
I've only met him twice. I feel like about 5'4".
Wow, that's crazy.
He is barely.
He's like Prince level. That's insane.
Right. Call it 5'6". I don't know. Barely at my shoulder. you know, so, and I think that, you know what's funny, when I talk to Stat Quo, and every time I talk to Stat Quo, you know, well, I talk to him a lot, but sometimes we'll talk about, you know, his artists, and his artists will get in trouble or something. I'll see, you know, I'll see a crazy headline. I got a brain fart right now in his artist name. I'll see a headline around his artist. I'll see a headline around Game, and I'll say, hey, what's going on?
Lil Xan, right?
Yeah, Lil Xan. Yeah, Lil Xan. So Lil Xan, you know, he had a headline the other day, and I said, yo, is this real? And he said, kind of. You know, or you know, something will happen with Game, and I'll say, man, this Game is in Philly right now with Meek, man. This is kind of crazy. And he'll be like, smoke and mirrors, you know. And so there's so much of that in entertainment anyway. I mean, it is entertainment, and he is maximizing that to 100%. I don't know if there is value here, though, right? Outside of the spectacle, I don't take anything substantial away from the fact that, man, this dude got abused, and, you know, he signed up for one thing, got all of it, it went left, got robbed, beat up, his girl, whatever happened with that, his family gets threatened, he has to go sit down for 2 months, boom, COVID-19 outside, he gets out 8 months earlier. You dropped a song telling everybody, you're mad that I'm out, I'm a rat. I don't see anything that makes me think about this outside of just the nutso factor of all the elements that came together that make all this entertaining, right? I don't hear music that, to me, says more than the step-by-steps of what's happening in his life, right? I don't hear anything that's really uplifting or a message that he learned from this, you know? I don't see that. So now I'm just watching Real World, you know, Vegas.
Truman Show.
You know, I'm watching Truman Show.
Yeah.
And that to me always feels like a lost opportunity. If I see someone who can galvanize 2 million people in 10 minutes, put a song out and get 12 million views in a day. He did an interview with Charlamagne, had like 2 million views on an interview in like 12 hours, which is almost unheard of. If I see someone who has this much power to move people in a direction and moves them solely to himself at the expense of his adversaries, I'm still waiting for that person to grow up. And once he does, I think he's going to have a lot of power. I think it could be interesting then.
Yo, so Guba dropped a day and a half ago. It's got 64 million views on YouTube. 64 million. But, you know, so I want to ask you though, Justin, like it's almost chicken and egg. You know, does he have that kind of power? Does he have that kind of command if he doesn't have these antics? You know, you did that piece, Fire in the Stadium, for us, you know, a couple of years ago. What does it say about people? Like, I don't know that someone who is going to deliver something more substantive, something more real is going to get that kind of attention. Like, I just don't know that it's possible. Like, you know, maybe it happens once a decade, like, you know, with Kendrick, with Damn or something like that. But even that doesn't have that kind of like mass consumption. So what does that say about people in general?
I think that we're consistent. You know, we slow down on the highway when there's a car wreck. We pull out our phones when crazy crackhead is wandering around screaming at clouds. You know, we like the spectacle, and we like, you know, the antics behind things. It's one thing that, you know, this is where this comparison will end, but one thing that I learned quite a bit of about Michael Jackson through Zach Greenberg's book, Michael Jackson Inc., was how everything with Michael Jackson was to have friction and tension. Quincy Jones told me this too. So he wanted every video to have a fight in it, a chase, something, right? And then Michael was also a big fan of Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey Circus. And so he realized that as long as he stayed in the news, whether it was good or bad, then he was able to bring more people to his album. So he built his whole house into a circus and amusement park, and he had all these wacko jacko stories out there, and he actually liked them. Like, he perpetuated a lot of them. But then when you get to his music, he has, you know, these big stadium anthems that make people cry because the songs are so beautiful, you know. So I think we've seen examples of people who can play the media great, pull out all kinds of crazy antics, dangle a baby over a balcony, and still make people, you know, move to We Are the World or whatever massive stadium song you want to pick from Michael Jackson that has substance in it. I think we've been the same as people. We still gravitate to the same types of, mindless explosions. But I also think there's people who know that, recognize that, maximize that, and then do their best to move people in a direction that they think adds value to their lives, but also to the world. So, I haven't seen the second part from 6ix9ine, but, kid's 24 years old, and on top of the world, talking about how many watches he has. And don't talk to me if you can't afford this watch.
Right. Yeah. Jake, what was your take?
I mean, I'm just giantly disappointed. I give 6ix9ine credit in making a compelling, case for himself, in terms of, the stuff with his, ex-girl and, hey, look, these guys that are currently in prison, they did me wrong first. But this is a guy, regardless of that has, done real harm to people. And, he sit there and sang like a canary and told the judge that he was a changed person. And on the basis of, this video, that's not the case. So you manipulated the system. And to me, the culture that, I call home has a lot more integrity than that. There's always spectacle. There's always been, a cat stacks or, there's different people that'll drive this attention, but I'm officially changing the channel. I watched the video. I did not tune in live on Friday, but at this point there's good people that are, currently exposed to COVID in penitentiary systems. And you got a guy that, used wealth and influence to get his way out. And that's the first thing that he's going to talk about. So, apart from the character flaws of being engaged in something and then telling on your peers, it's just not something I buy into. And I wish that we could take 2 million people in real time and get them to, listen to some of the great, hip hop and rap music that comes out. That's just, I'm sure I sound like a Dudley Do-Right, but that's truly where I'm coming from with it.
Do you think that Bobby Shmurda's release later this year will have a similar reaction? And do you think that, and I know it won't be in terms of mass appeal because, 6ix9ine was able to make a much bigger impact. But the snitching part of this, right, the rap part of this, the streets part of this is muted and compared to the broader spectacle.
Right.
But that means a lot to those people in those communities. Like that code carries a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so, you have your yin and your yang, and you're going to have the kid who you can make an argument that I'm not sure what happens to 6ix9ine if Bobby Shmurda never goes in, because New York basically got one new kid a year that reached spectacle status. I'm not sure if that, I'm not sure if that neighborhood still rocks the same if Bobby Shmurda's not sitting down. But I wonder how that side of it, the code side, the street side, will position Bobby Shmurda.
Yeah, I mean, do you know when Bobby's due back?
December 2020. They're trying to get him out earlier.
Which is when 6ix9ine was supposed to be back. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is interesting.
I think it's a tough comparison because Bobby really only had one big song before he went in.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have that. He didn't have the same kind of foundation built that 6ix9ine did. 6ix9ine had an 18-month run, unlike any that I can recall in a decade or more. So, I think that Bobby is going to be is not going to have anything close to that same kind of reception. And, if he can come out with another hot song, then, I think that he'll get that same kind of love that he had before. But 6ix9ine is just a different animal, When we talk about that code, I think that this shows that there's been a complete paradigm shift in terms of the code too. The code has been obliterated for this generation. Just like with, people didn't care when it came out that Drake didn't write his lyrics, like that kind of authenticity, actually doing what you say you do doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. I'd be much more interested in 6ix9ine if, the Grange family didn't invest millions upon millions of dollars in him. What would that look like? What would it look like if you couldn't have that type of security? What would it look like if you couldn't, have access to that type of budget? And instead, to me, it's Tia Tequila, it's reality TV, and I'm good. You know,
I just want to. I wonder what happens if Bobby Shmurda drops a diss track at 6ix9ine.
I'm sure he will, right? Like, hip hop's so funny too because we're always about who's the next person to get out. Like, I laugh. Like, you know, Tony Ayo coming out in the early 2000s. Like, people were anticipating him. Like, you know, I've never seen anything like that. You know, Pimp C, who when he went in was, you know, a cult figure of the South, but by the time he came out was this, you know, kind of a restored rap star. And yeah, I mean, Bobby's probably the next person to come out of note, right? I know there's a couple artists pending trial and stuff like that.
But here's the irony: 6ix9ine didn't get out. 6ix9ine is going to be in his own created prison for the next 10 years or longer. For as long as there's Treyway or people affiliated with them, he can't move. You know, so he can be famous, but there's not much he could do to enjoy it. You know, he's going to be in quarantine for quite some time. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know the particulars, but that was one thing I was imagining on Friday is like, how do you move from your house to wherever warehouse they shot that video in? Like, what does that even look like? And, you know, I had heard things that, you know, he was back in Brooklyn and all of that. And I'm like, yo, what part of Brooklyn can you really block off the street to get into a car? You know, it turns into like El Chapo going in for those hearings last year in New York. Like, what does that motorcade even look like? Because he's a moving target.
yeah,
You know?
it's not like he's nondescript either. You know,
Yeah.
I think about 50, you know, and how 50 had to move like in those early days, you know. But I think that 6ix9ine is even more compromised. Like, yeah, I would not want to be.
Yeah.
And
You think? Oh, go ahead.
And I think it's silly when rappers brag about their bulletproof cars. I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that means it's not safe for you to move around. That means you got enemies. That means you had to make a car bulletproof because that means people hate you.
Yeah.
That means, like, that's how dangerous it is. Oh, I know you're saying it's an expensive bulletproof car, and you think that's props, but that's also a sunk cost to me. You know, they're going to get you. They wait till you get out the car.
Here's the twisted logic too. Like, I think in some ways, for a lot of kids who look at him, he's going to seem even more real now because he did spend some time in prison. You know, and I think that I don't think he would be as big. I think he's going to end up being bigger now than he was even before, had this not happened.
I would encourage anyone to listen to that podcast. I know we talked about it a few months ago, but Sean Sotero and Complex made a 6ix9ine podcast, and he was an artist that I was not invested in before, but my opinions, my take has a lot to do with what I heard in that. And, you know, Sean sat in the courtroom and listened to how he addressed the judge when his life was, you know, on the line. And man, oh man, that'll change. That really shifted my perspective. Gave me a lot of things I didn't know. So.
Yeah. So give me a couple. You've mentioned a few times. Give me a couple like takeaways.
You know, there's a really interesting breakdown of you know, his sexual relations with a minor, you know, and that happening at the video shoot in Harlem. And I found that, you know, very chilling. I know that, you know, we've all seen various figures in hip hop and rap been, you know, accused of things, but when you kind of hear how that transpired, to me, I was like, damn, you know, this is deeper than snitching. And at the same time, you know, whatever he did versus Treyway is one thing, but, you know, Tekashi's been accused of putting his hands on, you know, his child's mother. And it's funny that when he was, you know, making a bargain, you know, with the state or the federal government, I forget which, to do that, like the stuff, his offenses against women were completely ignored. Like, and it's almost like, what does the legal system look at that? If you can point and say that this is what happened here, and just how much he fanned the flame too with, you know, his problems with Trippie Redd and Chief Keef. It's just disturbing. And it's a guy, it's no different than, you know, throwing a beer on an athlete when they can't come up to the stands necessarily and get you. And that's what I look at him like. He never was able to do anything for himself. And to now come out and grandstand on how tough you are and how much money you have, like I said, I just click and change the channel.
Yeah, so we talked about the Grange family's support for him. You know, we as industry insiders also know that Trippie Redd is supported by the same family. How real do we think that narrative was, or was that constructed for attention?
Smoke and mirrors. You know, when I was in Empire, there was an artist, and I'll look at his name. I'm brain farting on his name too. But he's Trippie Redd's cousin. And, you know.
Are you talking about Fiji McIntosh?
Yeah, Fiji McIntosh. I like Fiji McIntosh, man. That kid is fun.
Indeed.
And so you say what?
I said indeed.
Yeah, he's a fun kid. And there's definitely tension. You know, they definitely don't like each other. That part, everything I've ever seen has said that part is real. But you're on the same company, right? We saw what happened when Treyway walked in on the Grange family and 6ix9ine at dinner, right? Literally 2 days later, everybody was shut down.
Yeah.
Right. When there was a real threat, when there was a real problem, that family stepped in, made sure everything was okay for their investment, and then put the money back into the half that was theirs, that was, you know, still valuable after the opportunity to get out of jail with COVID. They didn't do anything like that on this side because they're invested in both. So I don't think of this as a real beef. I think a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, but there is definitely tension from everything that I've ever seen and everyone I've talked to.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's an Interscope playbook thing too, right? Like you had Death Row and Aftermath, you know, Death Row going at Aftermath, both were distributed by Interscope. You had The Game and 50. Like there's a lot of labels and they collect cash on both ends. But I do think, you know, despite the ties, I think there was real bad blood between the two of those camps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, back to real hip hop.
Word. Yeah.
Another thing that came up out of the verzuz is DMX spoke up this week saying he wanted to have his opportunity to go with Jay-Z in one of these things. I personally want to see Jay versus Ye. I think that would be a gigantic one. But you guys think a DMX Jay-Z one would be entertaining? Would it be close, or would it just be like, you know, more shine for DMX and Jay kind of like, you know, fighting like a contender who didn't have the same kind of catalog that he did?
Go ahead, Justin.
20 tracks. I think DMX got a shot. You know, one of the things that comes out of Jay-Z and this Jay Electronica project is one of the things I love about it is that this is the least, you know, capitalistic I've heard Jay-Z sound in a long time in bulk, right? I mean, outside of 444, but 444, he was selling a lot of buildings and buying a lot of expensive paintings. Yeah. This one, he left a lot of the, you know, the financial success off the project. And which showed me how great he could be in different boxes in a way I haven't thought about in a very long time. But you take someone with the spiritual connection that DMX has, the relentless energy, how big those tracks were. I mean, he had 2 number 1 albums in 1 year. He could pick 20 songs from those 2 albums only and be okay, right? You've got his first 5 albums all went number 1. Outside of You to the Dog, I'm pretty sure there's 4 songs that were huge in those years. So in a fractured 20-song environment with a spiritual dude talking to Jesus, you know, and he had big hits, I'm not sure that is a safe place for Jay-Z to hang when I don't have very much Jay-Z in bulk. I mean, I think when I think in general, it's always hard for, you know, the church and the bank. The church and the bank are like 2 different places, right? And I think it's a compelling matchup if I look at it that way. If I'm looking at if I base this off of who had the biggest songs or the most hit records or whatever, I think anybody you bow to, you kind of got to give it to Jay-Z unless it's Drake, you know. But I would like to see it. Like, I would like to see.
You think you ever would? You think it could happen?
I don't think Jay-Z would do it. No,
I don't either.
I don't think so. I think Jay-Z would buy it.
You think he'd do Kanye? I mean, so my point about the fight, right, is not that DMX isn't a worthy contender. It's more like if you're Floyd Mayweather, you're not going to fight a dude who is not going to bring you as much money but could knock you out.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to want to fight the Pacquiao or whoever who's going to bring the biggest purse to the table. And, you know, I don't know that Jay wants to get into it with DMX because X has got nothing to lose.
Well, and X, people root for the underdog too. And I feel like Jay-Z is a little bit vulnerable right now. There's a lot of folks that think he's too wealthy and too political and too all these things. And meanwhile, X has nothing to lose, and X is 15 years removed, more than that, you know, from a true W under his belt.
Yeah.
Well, let's take it from this standpoint. I mean, we already talked about how these versus battles become less competitive every time there's a new one, and everyone just starts, you know, saluting each other and complimenting each other. I think that's probably something that would happen more so than not with this. I don't think X is gonna. I don't see X really talking crazy about icons. You know, I've seen him be hypercritical about new artists.
Drake, yeah.
You know what I mean?
He seems like he has a chip, though. I mean, with Jay, those two battles, and, you know, X has always campaigned that, you know, and other people have said the same, that maybe it wasn't quite like history suggests. And also, let's not forget, you know, Jay becomes president of Def Jam, as I understand it. X isn't treated like the artist that had 5 or 6 consecutive #1 albums, leaves and goes back to Columbia, where his career began with Rough House. And to me, that was when he started sputtering. You know, a lot of that was personal life, but there is history there. There is history, because I know X was one of those artists like LL and other people that were like, wait a minute, like, I kept the lights on this label, and just because you're in the chair doesn't mean you get to talk to me like I'm a minion, you know?
Yeah, I'm not even going to concede that these have gotten less competitive. First of all, Babyface was talking greasy during both those competitions.
With a smile on his face.
Yeah, with a smile, but he was throwing grease, like hot grease at Teddy, like the whole time. And Teddy came with a full, like, you know, backup singer and dancer and crew and like keyboards. Like, yeah, those dudes came to battle. And let's not forget, like, Jill and Erykah were peace and kumbaya with their words, but Erykah had Bruce Lee fighting behind her the whole time. I mean, like, you know, there was showmanship, and Jill was like perfectly lit and, like, you know, framed and everything. You know, listen, they're competitors.
I don't know. Did you take RZA versus Primo? Like, they went 20 rounds. Like, I think Primo was caught off balance by RZA's deference to him the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, that battle was way less competitive, way less shot taken than Neo, Jonte Austin, and Hit Boy and Boy Wonder. Like, those guys were at least pretending like they were.
Yeah. I don't know if either of you guys know this, but you know they announced one this morning that it's happened. Did either of you happen to see it?
Which one?
Ludacris versus Nelly. Versus said it's official.
Oh, cool. That's dope. That's dope. Yeah.
Who do you got?
I'll take Luda, because along with his catalog, he's got about 30 #1 guest appearances.
It's all guest appearances. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Nelly got like
both of you are team Chris Bridges.
I'm taking Chris
Nelly
Bridges.
got like 3 or 4 joints, man. That's it. They're gigantic. They're seismic.
Yeah.
But like volume of catalog is Luda for sure.
No, I do agree
with the guest
with
appearances.
Yeah.
I saw him in concert once, and he did maybe 2 of his own songs, and then 30 like guest hooks.
Right. Like, you know, because Nelly hits different, not in the Northeast. I'll be completely concerned about that. Growing up in the South and even living out West now for 7 years, we know Nelly B-sides. The Midwest knows his B-sides. Like, you know, Lovin' Me is another song that sounds like every song at the beginning of Drake's career. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff on Pimp Juice on the second project, Air Force Ones, you know, like, there's a lot of stuff that 3 or 4 regions really know.
He won't be dipping in sweat and suit, though.
Right, probably not. But that's part of the problem, too, is because that's where Luda's from. And so, like, all those places, and then Luda gets more respect in, you know, in New York than Nelly does, 100%, especially after they shoot and remix. So, you know, it's I think it'll be interesting. I like Nelly more than I ever probably sound like I do. You know what that means? It's like I never select Nelly first, but I do have moments where I'm like, man, that was a good Nelly song. And I just don't think that Ludacris gets enough credit as is. And I don't care about, I'm a lyrics first guy just in general. I have never seen Nelly be able to put bars together, words together, phrases together, punchlines especially, the way Luda can. So
I mean, Luda's dope. Beast. I mean, when his lyricism is slept on. We actually wrote a piece on it. Like when he dropped, he did What's Your Fantasy with the Roots, the acapella joint. And he did it with the bongos and stuff. It was it really showcased his lyricism. The dude could spit, you know. And Nelly, to your point, like Apple Bottom Jeans came on like a couple days ago, and I was with my kids. You know, one is 10 and one is 19, and they were singing it. I'm like, my 10-year-old, all the words. I'm like, yo, how do you know this song? He's like, who doesn't know this song? I was like, wow, okay, all right, like, you know. So you got some joints, you know.
You got some women like Nelly a lot. Women like Nelly. Nelly was able to connect through Apple Bottom Jeans, through It's Getting Hot in Here. You know, he's got all those one-liners that make the club go up, make the spring break, Panama City, Club La Vila lit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think he gets nearly enough respect, but I don't think he wins this battle.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this. So, like, the verses are amazing, but there's been tech difficulties in every single one. The sound quality is always, you know what I mean? It's really more for the experience. Swiss has said that he wants to keep it there for the culture, you know, so everyone has access and, you know, all that other stuff. But do you guys think that it would take away if it were on like a Twitch or something like that, that was more built for this kind of experience and would allow for a better quality?
Yes. I think that Black people on Instagram, that is the target market.
Yeah.
The farther you get away and make it more difficult, now you're making people remember how much they don't like signing up for new stuff.
Yeah.
It used to be hard to go to the store to pick up an album or buy a magazine. Now it's hard to press the download button and look around. Yeah. I think that unless they're going to own the platform that it's on, to where that they can substantially cut the number of viewers and still somehow make more money on it, that's the only way I can see them doing it. Like, but everybody's on Instagram in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I mean, that's an interesting take. I don't know. I mean, the experience to me, like there was a couple times last night when Erykah left that I was like, all right, I'm coming back in 10, 20 minutes. And, you know, we obviously saw what happened with Teddy and Babyface. I'm also in favor of ownership. I mean, I give Swizz and Timberland a lot of credit because they could be monetizing this, as I understand it, a lot better than they are. And instead, they do, like you said, Justin, and make it for the people.
Yeah, just on the Jay and DMX thing. So you talked about like DMX being able to play like 20 songs from 2 albums. Jay could play 2 songs from 10 albums. You know what I mean? Like, and just be in it, and both and all be monster hits. Like, I don't know.
Well, what I mean by that is, it seems like Jay-Z has so much more than DMX in general, because he does. Yeah. But in this frame, we're talking about 20 songs. So you take 2 songs from 10 albums of Jay-Z, or 20 songs from 2 albums from Jay-Z. The 20 songs that DMX plays, or half those songs that DMX plays, are going to be cultural, they're going to be religious, they're going to be spiritual, they're going to be talking to all these aspects of life that I don't know if Jay-Z, up until maybe after he comes back from retirement, maybe after Blueprint 3, maybe after, you know, the Art Collector's album, maybe 444. I don't know if he has that many that touch on the certain things that we love about DMX. So there would be a stark contrast. If DMX plays Rough Riders Anthem at the right point, I'm going nuts. If he plays, you know, Slippin' at the right time, I'm going nuts. I don't know what Jay-Z plays after Slippin'. You know what I mean? I don't know what Jay-Z plays after Damien. I don't know.
Also, you know, I think of it too, though. Like, I love X, you know, and he had an interview a few years ago on Drink Champs that was phenomenal, and obviously Breakfast Club. But can he sell it? Like, even down to this clip, like him with Nori and EFN, you know, talking that he would like to battle Jay. It was a little bit coherent. It was a little bit not. Like, and Jay can come in there and be the politician and finesse and give stories. And if Jay did that, I don't think the records just themselves matter. I think it's a different story.
I'm going with regrets. I'm going with regrets after Slipping. Like, I mean,
that's a good call.
I don't know. I'm just saying. Jay got some joints too. Like,
the Evils.
He covered a lot of stuff.
I've never seen people cry at a Jay-Z concert the way I've seen them consistently every single time at a DMX concert. And I think that anytime there's a stark difference between 2 people, or people are accused of being in, you know, copycats of each other, those to me make the best battles. And so to me, if we're gonna, like, I would like DMX over Jay-Z Kanye, because every time I hear Jay-Z Kanye, I'm like, man, one of these guys wrote way more, a higher percentage of his songs than the other guy. It's going to be going on in the back of my mind.
Word.
You know, same, like Drake Kanye would be fair on that level, but the same thing with Jay-Z Drake. The reason why I think Jay-Z Drake would be awesome is because you have two people have been running the charts at different points in their careers, at different times. It's almost like Jay ran the charts and then Drake ran the charts, you know. And so that's
that's why I think Drake and Ye would be. I mean, Jay and Ye would be because the narrative right there. Yeah. You know, the two brothers, and they are more in the same era, even though Jay, you know, had a few years head start on them. I just think that one, and plus they could also play. Yeah, Kanye could just play Jay joints and be like, "What?"
right. Kanye's commentary would be legendary.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you'll get Dr. Dre in one of these before you get Jay. But you know, with the title connection, Jay, when you talk about, you know, especially with his ties to both Swizz and Tim, like Jay could do it and really behoove title in an interesting way. I mean, strategically.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the battles that I'm not sure they've officially announced yet, but they're still talking about coming through versus is 3 6 Mafia versus Bone Thugs. Yeah. Right. And I'm a diehard Bone Thugs fan, so I know who I'm rooting for. You know, 3 6 Mafia's career extended much longer in a bigger way than Bone Thugs. But I think Bone Thugs starts off hotter than 3 6. Mm-hmm. The point is, neither Bone Thugs doesn't have a DJ Paul. Like, so they're going to be sitting in there,
They need DJ Unique, yeah.
Right, they need DJ Unique to sit there and present these songs. I watch Jam TV all the time, and I'm watching Busy Bones behind the stories behind his career, right? He's talking about the time he got robbed at Fat Burger. He's talking about, this is how Notorious Thugs came out with Biggie. Like, he just sits there in his living room and tells these crazy stories. And I'm watching him fascinated because I'm a fan. A lot of these songs are multi-million, you know, hit records and cultural touch points. And he just sounds crazy, right? Like, Crazy Bone is the most prolific member, but he sounds like he's, you know, has like he's camera shy, you know, like he doesn't present.
Like so, Bill Belichick in the press conference.
Right. It's like Pop at halftime, you know what I mean? So that is a very real dynamic. I know Hov would sound very controlled and mannered and slick talking and maybe a little snarky, pull of, you know, younger babyface going against anybody. But I don't know if I've seen a more powerful interview than the First Drink Champs DMX interview, and he's sitting there crying. You know what I'm saying? Like, DMX would stop playing songs, beat on the table, and rap the rest of his songs. Heartbeat. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is just a different type of effect people have. Like, Kanye and DMX could be interesting because people cry over Kanye all the time. I know young kids who are sitting here shedding tears over, you know, freaking Fade. You know what I mean? And I just think that level of emotion, outside of sheer respect and deference for the massive amount of success that Jay-Z's been able to create, just doesn't exist around his products, right? You have envy and respect and leadership from Hov, but you got emotion from DMX, and that is.
And you want to root. We all want to root for DMX. Like, you want to see one more ride in the sunset, and that's why, you know, early last year when he was talking about back with Def Jam, back with Swizz, which we've heard before, like, I want that is as good a story for hip hop as you can get, you know. So
that's why I'm not taking that battle from Jay. Yeah.
Word.
Yeah. So we talked about 50 Cent earlier in terms of Tekashi 6ix9ine. 50's been in the news this week too. He has some sharp words about his fellow G Unit members. Jay, you know, what are your thoughts? Can you break down what he said and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, and 50 has a book to promote. It's not his first book, but it's a book that chronicles his business dealings. And I guess there's a few lines in the book that 50 also kind of released as an excerpt on Lloyd Banks and Tony Ayo in particular, and how he wanted so much more for them with G Unit than they had to offer. You know, he specifically says that, you know, Lloyd Banks kind of balked at the idea of social media, you know, and I know Yayo was, you know, always in the streets and in and out, and it really just held back 50's vision for what this group could be. And I have to tell you, I mean, as somebody who covered those guys a lot in interviews and was around for that mid-2000s era, I think 50 has a really valid point. And he doesn't take away the artistry of either, but I feel like G Unit was poised to be so much more than they ever became. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Justin, you got thoughts on this?
I'm a big fan of, you know, it's actually funny because the first First piece I think ever published for Hip Hop DX when you were editor-in-chief, Jake, was 50 more like Diddy. And it looked at how, this is 2010, so it looked at how 50's career was going to look less like Jay-Z, meaning the music was going to be the touch point that allowed him to expand his business ventures, and more like Diddy's, where he would pivot into other just business aspects and opportunities off the brand, more so. And it was based a large part off of the 50th Law, the book that he put out with Robert Greene, which looked at that point, less of his business dealings, but more of his street dealings, and how he was able to conquer those in a way that's similar to the topics that Robert Greene talked about in the 48th Laws about. And this one is, you know, I haven't checked the audiobook yet. I definitely will. It's on my list of things to do. But one thing that's consistent between those two things with 50 is that he always either complains or talks about how he's always the hardest worker in his crew. And I honestly don't see a whole lot of work ethic in general from Bank, Buck, or Yayo. Like, I've never seen it, right? I mean, when I listen to Lloyd Banks, I've never been a Lloyd Banks fan. I don't think he's whack. I just think he's boring. It sounds like someone who's just going through the motions, right? I was a big Young Buck fan just because he was coming from the South. He had that energy. He was rocking with New York cats, but he was inconsistent. And 50 was always cutting edge, right? He was thinking about, okay, let's partner with Coca-Cola, get this vitamin water. Let's partner with vitamin water. He had something called Boo Boo TV in the beginning, which was the precursor, if I'm not mistaken, around the same time as This Is 50. And it was kind of going at, you know, the World Star market. You know, like, he was always pushing new opportunities, right? I mean, and if you go back to a lot of the street stuff he was talking about in 50th Law, those same things were there, right? And so I don't think that this is incendiary. I don't think that this is something that is unexpected. I think if anybody tells you that Lloyd Banks says he doesn't want to get online, yeah, that sounds like Lloyd Banks, you know? And that truthfully has been the difference between so many people from that era that have been able to cross over into, you know, the teens and now the 20s with some sort of respect and success, right? They were able to bring their audiences to the new places where people are now hanging out. And none of that, from the articles I've read about 50's description of Lloyd Banks and Yayo and Buck, sounded like a surprise to me. I haven't seen any of their responses. I'd be surprised if they don't agree.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing too about G-Unit is they always come back together. Like, you know, and I agree with everything that you said. You know, I always thought that, you know, take Game out of it. I thought Young Buck was the most interesting member of G-Unit as an artist. And I think Lloyd Banks is wildly talented, but a little bit boring for my ears. But I'm also not a mixtape, you know, New York, early 2000s guy like that. And, you know, I remember around the time that G-Unit released its second album, 2008, it was the week that Young Buck had been ousted from the group. And I went to G-Unit's offices in New York, and I was there with Yayo, Lloyd Banks, and 50. And every time I'd ask a question, 50 would give the guys, and I would direct them at Tony and direct them at Lloyd, and they would be very short-winded or they'd defer to 50. And I remember 50 just being like, ugh, and he was promoting that album. And we've seen that time and time again. And look at what both of those guys have accomplished without 50, and it's not even in comparison to their skills. So I do agree, and I think he makes a valid point. And I don't think it's a feud or beef, similar to maybe Eminem and D12. But, you know, they'll be cool again. I mean, he grew up with those two guys.
So 50, like Tekashi, is also a great master at, like, garnering attention, you know, and I think it's a great talking point. But I actually take issue with the premise. You know, I don't believe that stars are built. I think they're born. And we've all been around a lot of talented artists, and you can hear them on record, and the records are fire, the lyrics are great, they're talking about something, but you see them live, and it's like, you know, dead fish. Like, they're just not stars, and they're people who are coming specifically to mind for me. Then there are other people that you go and you see them, and you can just tell there's something about them where you just can't take your eyes off of them. They are just compelling. They're just born with it, is what it is. And yes, work ethic is a part of it. You do have to have the grind and the grit and the hustle to get there. But for some people, it doesn't matter how hard they work; they're never gonna, you know, go beyond a certain point. And other people, like, you know, they can work half as hard and just, people are always going to want to see what they got going on. So, I love hearing 50's take on things, but, I don't know that the trajectory for Buck and Lloyd Banks would have been any different how they put in, more time and more hours.
I don't know. I mean, I also think there's a case to be made, and this starts long before 50, of like the dangers of making your crew your homeboys. Like, the Outlaws have songs I love. Tupac is my favorite rapper, but he could have come with, probably some more interesting guys that were running in his circle than looking within his family and immediate circle to come with that group. Same case with Junior Mafia. Like, Kim had star power. I don't know if, some of those, like, name some of the things on their own that even Lil Cease has done, and you're hard pressed. But then you look at a Jay who, yes, he puts Bleak on first, but he had no relation to Beanie Siegel. He had no relation to Kanye and Young Guns and all these different people. He went with the talent, Puffy, the talent, and I think that hangs around a lot longer because the drive is there and the talent is there.
Kanye.
I think that both Buck and Banks. Well, I think Buck actually had an opportunity because I think Buck has star power. I do think Buck has like an energy that is higher than Banks. I don't think he's a superstar, but I definitely think that he's at least the most interesting one. But and I agree 100%. I don't think superstar was in the cards for any of those guys, but I think they could be a lot farther down the road. I think that they could be, names on their own away from 50, or at least have their own, independent community that is championing them all the time in forums, who are just relentlessly saying, "What about this guy?" Like Ari the Rugged Man has. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Banks put on a show, and across the street was an Ari the Rugged Man show. I'm not sure who has more fans. But I know who's had more investment, been in more radio, is more connected to more people who do stadiums. And I don't even see those guys doing that. And so that, to me, I don't think stars in there, but that's where work ethic comes into play, right? You could work past your gifts, or, work past your expectations. I think these guys were like, "Yo, we hit the jackpot, we good enough."
Yeah, you do have to definitely work, right? Gifts or not, and it'll push you further along. There's a guy that I saw 2001. This was a show in New York at Irving Plaza. Talib Kweli was on, and he said, "I'm gonna bring out this guy. He's got beats and everything's dope. But he's a rapper too." And so, guy comes out, starts rapping. He's whack. He literally gets booed off the stage. He can't finish the song because the crowd is booing so hard. And the dude's name was Kanye West. Now Ye, I think, was always a superstar in his own mind, but I don't think he had the confidence at first to actually reveal it on stage. I think he was meek and didn't present in the same way. And it took work, a lot of reps to get to that comfort zone, but now, he's a superstar in a way that, very few people are. I guess he probably competes with Tekashi too, in terms of attention and being able to command mind share. So I do think that, it takes work and you got to reveal, but again, certain people, they can work and work and work, and it's just not going to happen. I think it's interesting too. I think about, in the NBA, it's similar. There are players out there. You look at a Dominic Wilkins, or a Sean Kemp, guys who were just as physically talented, or Harold Miner. People like that as Michael Jordan, but they did not have the same work ethic, and thus did not become anything close to what MJ did. So I think there are parallels there as well. But, The Last Dance has been another cultural moment that's come from COVID. I found out, first of all, that, did you guys know that the last episode was not going to be completed till May 10th?
Oh, wow.
They moved it up, 3 or 4 months, and it took Herculean efforts to actually get it done. But one of the things that has stood out for me has been the soundtrack. And, you know, they put out the playlist on Spotify. It's so like refreshingly pure in terms of like just capturing the 90s, not pop music though. So you got like music by Naughty, by Nas, by Tribe, Outkast, Black Sheep, Special Ed, Wu. I mean, how has it's rare these days to see something where the music stands out like that, but like how have you guys reacted to the music in the show?
Man, like the most recent episode, I finished watching and then I start playing the songs again. Like it was funny. Like, you know, the hip hop is amazing. Like I've not that's the most I've liked Nas, If I Rolled the World, like just getting Lauren singing at the beginning, you know, since the 90s. But it was funny, it was even like the Stereo MCs drop in the recent episode that I was just like, yo, I never realized how much I liked that record until the context of how they used it on the show. So it's phenomenal. And to me, it's like the thing on TV that I always applaud for music is Insecure. Like that literally has made songs into like our collective lexicon, you know, you can go down the list, but this is a great celebration of music from the 80s and 90s.
I think it's ironic, given Nori's story about Michael Jordan saying, fuck hip hop. I'm sitting there like, well, Michael Jordan clearly did not touch this soundtrack. I think there's not enough Anita Baker for Michael Jordan. But away from that, I think it's incredible. Like when they played, which one was it? How You Like Me Now? Is that they played during the 63?
Oh, Kool Moe Dee.
I think was that there, or did they play? I know How You Like Me Now. I feel like was somewhere in there.
Yeah.
The LL Cool J joint.
Bigger and Deffer, yeah.
You know, like when they show the highlights and they're putting these tracks behind it. Now this is like, you know, 12-year-old Justin Hunt screaming, you know, because this is the stuff I'm listening to when my boombox is playing while I'm shooting jumpers in the backyard. You know what I mean? like, and so
you know who I wish got to see this is Stuart Scott, man, because he was somebody who bridged, you know, hip hop and pro sports at a time when that wasn't the thing. And now you've got, you know, Scott Van Pelt, huge hip hop fan, makes it known. And you go back to that old footage on SportsCenter and yeah, God bless Stuart Scott, man, because, you know, anyway.
He came, I used to work at this company called Vanguard. It was 5 magazines, Honey, Essence, and Savoy, and a bunch of other things. But like, Stuart Scott came and spoke one day to just like 20 of us in a conference room. He was so inspirational and so down to earth and cool and smooth, man. He was my frat brother. Like, I love that guy, man. Yeah, that's a hard one. But he would have been amazing for this to see his interviews. Yeah. It's been great watching it with my kids too, because they're clearly not old enough to remember it, but 2K has actually given them appreciation for players beyond this generation in a way that I don't think has ever happened for kids before this. And so they still look at Jordan as being the GOAT. But now looking at them, it's like, it's almost like cliffhanger type stuff. Like I'm telling my son, just wait till the next episode. This is going to blow your mind what happens next episode.
But you'd have to be learning stuff too, right?
Not really. I mean, again, as I'll say, in every single time we discuss this, my first son's name is Jordan. so I know quite a bit about Michael Jordan. There's a book called Playing for Keeps by David Halberstam, which is kind of like the definitive biography of Michael Jordan. And I don't know that there's a story on this that I've seen yet that wasn't in that book, but there's a difference in reading it versus seeing it. Like I had read about that legendary Dream Team practice probably 10, 12 years ago whenever the book came out. But to see it, the footage was incredible. So, I still enjoy it as if, and I also was the guy who bought every time the Bulls won a championship, they'd put out these VHSs like recapping the year and the finals and stuff like that with interviews. I mean, I was a super devoted fan, but but it's great to watch it and relive it through their eyes.
Can I put one question to both of you related to The Last Dance? In a recent episode, they show not only how the press and, the final, season was just pushing on Jordan, are you going to retire, to the point where he laughs about it, but he's very clearly bothered. But then once the Atlantic City narrative and the gambling comes into play, it gets to the point where Jordan no longer cooperates with the press. Do either of you see any overlap with that and how the media and the hip hop journalism community, the relationship between that and our stars?
100%. I think, well, one, you have, but they put me on the covers because I earned for them, right? Jay-Z's been complaining about that for a while. Eminem, some of my funniest Eminem memories are him going at double XL. Double XL, double XL. Like it's hilarious. I think a lot of that is borrowed from how athletes, and particularly Michael Jordan, handled the press, or when the things that he went through with the press. Michael Jackson too bled into the way Jay-Z looks at it, you know, and the way Eminem, these guys looked at it a decade later as they were getting to that pinnacle. But digital media has, I remember sitting in strategy sessions where, you know, websites' whole approach was to stand on the shoulder of giants, right? Talk about these artists so they retweet us, and then we get more people coming back to the page. You know, and as everything gets easier, artists realize more and more that they can control more of their own environment. They can distribute music, you know, to a degree, 100% on their own and find success. And they can just do news on themselves. They can cover themselves. So I think what happens is now there's music who also look at the media as predatory, questioning the value that we add. And a lot of times the media's approach, Ambrosia for head, AFH excluded, is kind of that way, right? Where we're covering things that people are generally talking about. And it's unfortunate because there is a fracture there where there's not a trust of each other on both sides, or fairness in the way we treat each other on both sides. But I still think that, and I think Michael Jordan understood that too, to a degree, which is why he decided to release this docuseries and announced it the day that LeBron won a title, where you kind of need other people to tell your stories too. And looking at what Michael Jordan went through, or how he decided to stop talking to the media back then, the way his whole life plays out, past 2 years, 3 years, is the first time I've ever seen Michael Jordan talk about police brutality, the way Black people are treated in this country. First time I've seen him announce that he opened up something charitable. He opened up a hospital in Charlotte, did a lot of press around that. First time I've ever seen him really talk about the good stuff that he does. And you have a whole documentary that is framing his whole life, right? So he's gone to the point where it's like, oh, the media is talking about how great I am. I'm selling some sneakers. Oh, man, this media is over here telling me I'm gambling too much. I'm crazy. I'm not talking to nobody. Fuck them all. I'm rich now. And then it gets to the point where it's like, man, people are over here talking about me like I'm not a nice guy. Maybe I should do something for my people. You know, this Black Lives Matter thing, I'm not sure I could sit this one out like I did Harvey Gantt. Maybe I should do something, right? And so it's the ebb and flow that I see happen consistently. And I think that artists tend to go through that now. I think the Jay-Z's and the Diddy's are interesting because they're now building empires, media empires at the same time. You know, Russell took that approach with most of his endeavors over the past 15 years or so. So, you know, I just think it's interesting considering everybody at some points needs other people to, you know, support their story, to reiterate their narrative. And that's where Michael Jordan is now.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting to me. I'm not sure that I'm willing to concede that there's been a massive evolution in thought in his desire to speak out, as much as it's coinciding with the expectation and like the norm. You know, so like Jay is talking less about money and things like that because that's not in vogue right now. That's just not. This is the era of woke and like, you know, and helping people and things like that.
Activism.
So Jay has always been very much about staying on trend, you know, with what's current. Same thing with MJ. Like he sees LeBron speaking out and Wade and, you know, all these guys standing up on the ESPY stage and things like that. And if he doesn't have a voice in that, he now looks anachronistic. He doesn't look like he's in step with the times. So I'm not sure that I would give it to him suddenly becoming more activist and more desirous of having a stake. Just like back then, he dropped out of the scene because he was very much about controlling his own narrative. And he's expressed real reservations about this coming out because he was concerned that it was going to tarnish and diminish his image, his legacy. But what he's saying, I think, is that the times have evolved so much that it's actually just building on it because people want transparency. They want to see flaws in their heroes. They want to feel like they're human too. And then you can truly be like Mike because you understand that Mike is not perfect and I'm not perfect too. So we can all be like each other. So, I found that part of it to be very, very interesting. I also, just to touch on what you talked about earlier, Justin, I love the fact that there's been a paradigm shift and that these superstars don't need the press anymore. They can completely bypass it. Drake hasn't done an award show in years. He hasn't done.
He did do the Grammys when he got up on the podium and basically said, "You don't need this."
Right, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, performing.
And he hosted the ESPYs.
Oh, right.
But
he hosted the ESPYs.
Right. Well, yeah, but performing as like a music artist, like he's like, no, I'm not gonna like boost your show like that. I don't need the shine, And
anymore.
I'm the biggest artist of all time.
Put it on your shoulders. I don't need it anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. And Beyonce doesn't do interviews. Like, none of these guys need to do interviews anymore. Even Tekashi, like he is very much of his own making, Grange money and all that other stuff, but he didn't need media. Like he Cardi B, people like that are the stars of a new era where they don't need the press anymore.
I hedge on Tekashi. I think there was an explosion. And Google Trends reiterates this. There's an explosion in Tekashi when he's on the Breakfast Club and how he handles Charlemagne. Like that was when old people was like, who's this kid talking to Charlemagne in a way? That's old millennial hip hop generation now are tuning in to everything. I think that was a tipping point for him. I hedge on Jay-Z too. These guys put out Watch the Throne the year everybody loses their home. Like the Great Recession happens and they're like new Watch Alert Cublo. I think maybe they could have been at a point where they were too far into the process to change that album. But Watch the Throne, the Art Collector album, I could never remember that came.
Magna Carta.
That was not with the times at all. And so he got there over time, but he was late and he was slow. And I honestly think Michael Jordan really doesn't care what anybody thinks. I don't think you become Michael Jordan caring about what other people think. And like his whole life has basically been, he cared about his brother, obviously his parents. He cared about Dean Smith and he cared about winning. Now I haven't read all the books and everything every book that's come out, but I watched all the tapes. I read Jordan Rules. I read Airtime. I think we're just part of that generation. And I 100% think that LeBron being looked at in a way that on the court you can argue which values you have more. Meaning, do you value someone who is looking at everybody's up against as competition, et cetera, or do you value teamwork, right? Because now you have Jordan's success and you have LeBron's success, which are different approaches that both get you in kind of a GOAT conversation. That to me was where Jordan realizes he needed the media again. Now he owns this, but he let people conduct the interviews. He talked about things he's never talked about before. And I think that had less to do with the level of activism, et cetera, anyone else is putting out there. Because Kareem was doing all that stuff before Jordan got there, and Jordan actively decided not to be Kareem in that regard. Muhammad Ali was out here doing all this stuff. Jordan actively decided not to be Muhammad Ali in this regard. Michael Jordan had a whole brand. He was selling all these sneakers. He was winning all these titles. He's chasing Magic. He's chasing Bird every day. Got all this media on him. I'm going to go play baseball, come back, play basketball, be the greatest ever. I don't know if let's say LeBron doesn't exist. I don't think Kobe, for example, motivates Jordan to be philanthropic. I don't think Kobe motivated Jordan to be like, I got to do something for my community. Kobe was taken from the Jordan rules in that sense, in that regard. Just keep all the controversial conversations, outside the box as long as you can. And so those things, like just the era that's changing, I agree with you on that point. But I think that had more to do with Yo, am I still the GOAT? If I don't start showing people I care about them, then I'm not just taking from their community. I think Drake and Jordan are very similar.
Well, so here's what I'll give you two things that I think show that both Jordan and Jay were reactionary. So you mentioned Watch the Throne and Magna Carta Holy Grail. So Watch the Throne was received pretty well. You know, it had gigantic hit with like Ends in Paris, right?
Otis, yeah.
But if you had predicted before that album dropped what the response would have been, and then looked at it after, I think that most people believe it underachieved. When you got the two biggest stars in hip hop performing together, that should have been a diamond album. Like it should have been gigantic, but it wasn't. Magna Carta Holy Grail, we all know where that went. Had both of those albums been gigantic and accustomed to what Jay had as expectations, I don't think we get 444. I think we got 444 because those didn't work, and Jay realized he had to be in a different lane, a different pocket, in order to like actually get people's attention and cement his legacy. Similarly with MJ, you're right. Kobe was there. Kobe was challenging Jordan. Kobe was dropping 81 in a game and had 5 championships, and he's in theory much closer to challenging Jordan's throne than LeBron. But Jordan didn't feel compelled to change his ways because Kobe was made in his mold. Kobe was an extension of him. But then you got this guy, and he comes out, and he truly doesn't care. He is like alienating half of his fan base, you know, or half of his customer base, I should say, who don't subscribe to his political ideologies. He's cursing, like he's doing all these things, and yet he's still viewed as a potential GOAT, or maybe the GOAT.
And he's wearing your number.
And he's wearing your number too, right? So Jordan says, "Oh," and like you said, like the day that the date of the parade, the championship parade in 2016, when LeBron wins, and people are starting to like talk about it, and you know the Golden State Warriors had gotten on to the brink of becoming the greatest team ever. Is when it comes out, and that's when Jordan says, "Oh, you know, I need to do this," and he sees LeBron being an activist and says, "Oh, for me to be in step and me to be in these modern times, I need to be an activist." So I don't think if LeBron had not been the way he is, Jordan's persona evolves. Like, yeah,
and Shut Up and Dribble didn't paint Jordan in the nicest light.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
Well, why do you think, or, I mean, I think I've watched 8 of the episodes so far. So I get blurred of which episode everyone else is on right now.
Wait, you saw 8? Like,
yeah, there was a files that were sent around to like I hate them.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Damn.
Like I've seen.
We have much to discuss now.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure what parts they've shown or they haven't shown yet, but you find the greatest athletes in existence before Jordan shows up. Outside of OJ, pretty sure every one of them had some sort of connection to the community or some sort of, you know, social awareness that crept into their point of view, their actions, but also their legacies, right? Ali's not the greatest because he had the best record. Mm-hmm. You know, he's not, you know, you can argue Jim Brown is the greatest, you know, running back because of how on the field, but I'd argue off. I don't know that many people actually remember Jim Brown on the field.
Yeah.
You know, Kareem, honestly, Kareem to me comes out looking way better the more success that LeBron has, because Kareem was so outspoken, the media hated him and shitted on all his accomplishments his whole career. So if I'm 84 to 90, you know, on the court, I'm sure, as it always is discussed, Jordan is chasing Magic and they're chasing Bird. But the examples of greatness in sport in the world always had this connection to their communities. And Jordan's talking to his mama saying, "Hey, I can't come out here and support this dude. I don't know who he is. I got a lot to lose. I'll give you some money though." Right? He made a conscious choice, right? And so I wonder why he wouldn't be reactionary to those aspects up until that time. Because after the first three-peat, which is I think probably the second titles when the Harvey Gantt thing was, I know I lived in North Carolina around that time, and I feel like that was like around the Portland series. I don't know if Jordan is the GOAT in the Portland series, and I'm not sure him speaking out on that case against a certified white supremacist in office in North Carolina is polarizing at all. You know, like I don't feel like he actually cares. But over time, I feel like he needs the media to tell his stories because of the fact that he sees these other people doing things, especially LeBron in that situation. But I'm not sure that's like, you know, outside of that, I don't think that it's truly reactionary just based off of the times changing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's, I mean, correct me if that's not what you're saying, but I feel like Jordan needs to, while he's reminding people about his legacy, he's expanding on it too, right? Like, he's done a lot of philanthropic stuff like the hospital thing. He just chose not to talk about it. He had this Harvey Gantt thing floating around in the background forever. He just now explained that he actually did give money. He never shared that before. You know, I don't know if his openness is because of LeBron in them as much as, you know, him on his own. Like, come on, Doug. You got people dying in the street and you're still not talking? I mean, that is a problem whether LeBron exists or not. You know, and the same thing with Drake. Like, Drake is running into that now. And sure, he's sitting at the top of the charts, but people's view of, the culture's view of him is becoming more narrow. And at a time when it needs to expand. And that expansion comes from, you know, connecting more broadly with your community.
Yeah, you know, I just think he was a guy who cared about image, right? Like, he cared like deeply about his image, and he wanted to control it and appear kind of perfect, really. You know, or at least blank canvas. You could make of it what you wanted it to be, and that's kind of an assimilation mentality. Like, don't ruffle too many feathers. And because of that, you kind of care about what everyone thinks, because if you're not making enemies, if you're not like making someone angry, you're not truly being true to yourself, because you can't please all people all the time. Like, it's almost the most reductionist pop music that there can be. You know, he's Katy Perry or like whatever. But now we're in an era where perfection isn't glorified. People don't want perfection. People want warts. People want like reality TV. They want social media. They want Twitter. They want the rough edges. And so
they want DMX to beat Jay-Z.
Yeah. So he's just evolving with the times. I'm not sure it's a conscious like, oh, I need to show more of myself because, you know, I need to do this for the kids and stuff like that. It's just, in order to continue to maintain my image as I have always, I need to go in this direction.
I just don't know if that part, I mean, and I don't know I'm belaboring this point. I just don't see the social issues that I think we're referencing Jordan reacting to have ever changed in his life. You know, if he's growing up and the biggest stars are the ones who are the most socially active, you'd think that would make a difference.
But they weren't the biggest stars.
Who was bigger than Muhammad Ali?
Yeah, Muhammad Ali was big and the biggest at the time, but I would argue that Jordan was just as big, and Jordan had more influence in terms of like getting people to buy stuff. You know, you didn't have Muhammad Ali sneakers, Muhammad Ali, you know, stuff.
He didn't
like
have
that.
anything to sell like that.
Yeah,
right.
And Jordan wanted to be a conglomerate. He wanted to be he wanted to be a business, and that's what he became. He's a brand.
Right. Just a choice he made to save himself.
Yeah.
You know, what was I gonna say? Have you guys got to the part wait, have they shown, I can't remember which side of this one. I don't know, spoiler alerts, but I'm about to spoil your alert real quick. Have you seen the part where have they shown this part where when Michael's in a room in some arena and
Pitching pennies?
No, the pitching pennies. I like that one too, though. No, with the guys, they just want a title or they just want a big game or something. And Jordan's like, guys, can I be alone for a second? I just got to be alone for a second. Give about 10 minutes. And then the producer, whoever's in the room, is like, sure, yeah, we'll get out of here. You want to call your wife? And Jordan was
yeah.
I want to call my wife.
Yeah.
He did not want to call his wife, man.
That was at the finals. He just won the finals, yeah.
Yeah, did they show that one yet?
They showed that.
He did not want to talk to his wife, man. That's my favorite part of this whole thing. That's how you knew. That's why you never saw Juanita.
Yeah.
He did not want to talk to her.
There's another
with the camera on.
there's another documentary out that's capturing people's mind share right now too. Is the Atlanta child murders. Like, have you guys seen any of that yet?
I watched it all.
I have not seen it yet.
I've seen episode 1, but I'm gonna ask you, Jake, because you didn't live through it. Like I lived through it. Like I was actually like 10 years old when stuff started happening. Like that was one of the most terrifying things. What fascinates you about this?
I mean, I'm embarrassed for the education system to admit this, but I never knew that this happened until Mindhunter season 2. And,
oh wow! Are you serious? Oh wow!
Yeah, and I'm somebody that I'm a bit of a history buff, especially in terms of like criminal history and things like that. And so Mindhunter season 2 happened. I got really into it, kind of confused by the season, and then I did a podcast, the Atlanta Monster podcast, which I recommend anyone that's interested. And that kind of enlightened me to Andre's verse on Travis Scott's album, which blew my mind. The connection there. And then I wanted to watch this, so I've watched the whole series, and this series is, of those things, the most chilling of the pieces of art and content on it. And I was enthralled, and I finished it as soon as I could.
I've watched the first episode. Stuff like that is really hard for me to watch because it's right. I could only watch 2.5 or so episodes of Surviving R. Kelly, because I just hate to watch things that are built on other people's suffering.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line for me between educational and exploitational. So I got it. So but I'll dig into it because I did think it was really well done. So
I would encourage you to keep going. The first episode is a lot of exposition and a lot of catch up, and there was a lot of things that I didn't think were there. Episode 4 and 5, I think it's 5 total. Yeah, I mean, they've kept me up at night a little bit this month, just because I even down to Mindhunter, how it was portrayed versus really the case in defense of Wayne Williams is fascinating to me. And yeah, keep watching. Yeah,
you mentioned Travis Scott. I finally caught the Netflix documentary "Look Mama, I Can Fly" about him yesterday. I really enjoyed that. He's just such a compelling figure, Travis.
Definitely one of the great artists of the moment right now. And I said to somebody recently, he just did that single with Kid Cudi. I think Travis Scott is better on his own and letting people into his universe than when he's a featured artist or does like these one-offs with Cactus, these different other kind of collaborative projects. His albums, each of them are universes, pun intended.
Well, before we wrap it up, Justin, I'm gonna give you the heads up so you can be thinking about this. Jake and I end with our song of the week. But before we get to that, I also want to acknowledge that we lost another icon this weekend in Little Richard. He was definitely before any of our eras, but we all know the history and what he meant for rock and roll. And Prince is arguably my favorite artist of all time. Clearly the influence was there. Like he had as much influence as anyone over the last 50 years in terms of his style. His flamboyance, all of it. He was one of a kind. So I want to express acknowledgement for that too.
Definitely Little Richard. Was one of the people that put Jimi Hendrix on, a true rock and roll pioneer. And I challenge anyone, if you're not familiar with the music, listen to it. It sounds great. And this morning, I don't know if either of you know this, but Betty Wright passed away too.
Oh wow!
So it's crazy how deaths happen in bursts like that. But yeah, a lot of legends, especially of music and Black music, are passing away in 2020. And yeah, it's important to take time and say their names, listen to their music, highlight their accomplishments.
Yeah.
Are these all COVID related? I know, if I'm not
No.
mistaken, one of them was complications from COVID.
Little Richard was
I know Andre
cancer.
Harrell was a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
Little Richard was cancer.
cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know with Betty Wright. I know she was up there, and it's not for me to speak on Andre Harrell. I don't know when I read the reports in Variety and Billboard yesterday.
Yeah. Justin, have you kept up with Scarface? Have you talked to him since all this stuff happened?
I've reached out to him a few times. We haven't connected, so he's my prayers every day.
This guy, he got hit very hard. So yeah. All right, well, first of all, thank you for joining us. I hope that this is the first of many.
And I'm down anytime you guys are willing to have. This is great.
Yeah. Love the debates as always. Good to showcase them for everybody else. I've jumped on your IG at times and argue with you. So, but song of the week. I'll give it to you first, Justin. What's your song of the week?
Song of the week: Mozzie featuring King Von and G Herbo, Body Count. It's the third track on Mozzie's sixth album, Beyond Bulletproof. It's a drill mission, right? One thing that's interesting about this Mozzie album is that he's still in that coded, everything I say has to be 100% true. Let's handle this street stuff in this way for half the project. And, I think it's narrowing it in a way if you're not in the loop or in the know, when an artist spends that much time talking about stuff that you can't Google. But this version right here, it comes out raw, right? And it's up-tempo drill style. Mozzie doesn't use that much. But King Von has the best verse to me. He has everything that sounds like everything I ever loved about Lazy Bone, from the octave to the cadence to the pace. He says things that are accidentally funny, like when he says, I graduated from drive-bys. When I'm in the car, ain't no stopping at stop signs. Like, I just like the way that sounds. It makes me laugh a whole lot. And it's it brought me into this King Von wormhole where all he does is tell stories. And Took Her to the O is hilarious. He's always talking junk about these guys from 63rd. Anytime I have a song that makes me want to go other places, find more information, go Google things, that is generally the song of the week for me. And Mozzie's Body Count featuring King Von, G Herbo off of Beyond Bulletproof did that for me.
That's dope. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, King Von's on the rise, as is of course Mozzie and Herbo. I'm going classic with me. I'm going Diamond D in the Psychotic Neurotics. I went for mine. Just a classic record. People are familiar with the beat. Busta Rhymes and Swizz Beatz reused it with DJ Scratch, but it's probably my favorite Diamond D joint, more than Sally, more than Best Kept Secret. It's inspirational, great rhyming, great production. I think he made it with Jazzy J, who is hip hop royalty. And yeah, I've just been enjoying stunts, blunts, and hip hop this week. No pun intended.
That's dope. Until last night, I would have gone with Dolce & Gabbana Dalai Lama from Guap Dad 4000. It's really musical, and it was I'd started listening to the EP because I wanted to find out what the kid was all about. And the first couple songs didn't grab me. I wasn't right in the right headspace, but the third song, which is this, I was very, very musical and made me realize that he was different than a lot of the stuff you're hearing, and wanted me to dig in and go back and listen to more. And the second time around, I loved it all. But I love those kind of contrasts of like ignorance and like enlightenment, and he does it very well on this track. So I dig that. But it was eclipsed by Rolling Hills last night. I've heard that song before. I had the opportunity to sit with Jill. She came, played music for myself and like maybe 3 or 4 other people when that album dropped, and she just told stories. One of the stories she told was this song, it's the Boom Boom Suite, where she was just sitting with some Grand Marnier and singing, and she's dropping the vocals and everything, and then she just caught it. And she just started slipping into a whole other song that she freestyled. And the band went with her and started playing a completely different song. And if you go back and listen to that album, you'll hear it's both parts. They kept the whole thing, but she's just immensely talented. And hearing that song last night reminded me of just how gifted she is. And yeah, it touched me. So Rolling Hills. She's giving game, talking about the power that women have and not to give it away for free. So it's dope.
Word.
Word. Yo, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I love you guys. I hope you have a healthy week, all right?
Yeah,
Likewise,
you too, man.
fellas.
Word. All right. Later, Jits.